So then, we are back with more understandings from the Renewed Covenant, from the Aramaic English translation of the Word. This translation is from the original documents of the old prophets of Israel, from the time of then Yahweh giving His people then directives, and they were very prosperous while they were obedient to His holy instructions. The main question today is, are they being obedient ever since? Is the world then doing properly by having them as a measuring stick, so to speak? Are they truly then obeying what the Creator told them to do? And then the copy of the Word that you have, is it a worthy copy or falsified? You have to ask those questions, because when you begin of having a nation disobedient, and then you have a falsified copy of the Word, do you think you are doing a favor to God when you are doing your duties? In order for us to have these questions then answered, the best is then asking the most important prophet that ever lived. Because you have to admit, in terms of then Israel, since they are not obedient, why are they being referenced? Shouldn't you be obedient and you yourselves be then the reference? What do you measure then when a person has sinned? What do you use as a measuring stick? Do you have your mind then lined up with the Spirit, going with the flow of the Spirit of the world? Or do you have a firm foundation regarding the Torah, the prophets, and the writings? So let's evaluate what the Mashiach said. MashiYach, the 23rd chapter, gives us then a very important position of the Mashiach, the prophet. He is more important than Abraham. He is more important than Moses. He is more important of any prophet that lived before him. He is only subjected to the Creator Himself. So there is no other person or nation in this earth more important than the Mashiach. So let's read then what he said. In the 23rd chapter, there is a unique conversation going on, because then the people of the law, or the hebraic people of the time when he came, they were involved with a takanot and masim. Many people, they are not taking the time and studying those. Takanot, masim. Did you know that in the original manuscript of MashiYach you find then in 23rd chapter the Mashiach is speaking of this takanot masim? But then people are lazy, they don't study, and they go with the flow of the world. Their minds are not educated, and then they speak what they don't understand. Understanding Israel is in sin. So what makes them a reference point since they are disobedient? Shouldn't you have then the proper basis of the scripture, so then you can become the reference point? Understanding from the time of the Mashiach, when he was around, there were more than 10,000 laws mixed with the holy laws. So because the Mashiach then was cleaning up the holy instructions, and he had a direct confrontation with the people of the law, speaking of Israel, because they are disobedient. What would be then our understanding when we face a group of people disobedient? Are they going to go along with them and being disobedient as they are? What is your position before God? If you know they are then in disobedience, being scoundrels, and you go along with the flow, then you are a scoundrel. The Messiah said they are disobedient. So then read what the Messiah said. "23rd chapter. Then Yahweh Yeshua spoke with the crowds and with his disciples. And he said to them, the scribes and the people of the law, they sit on Moses' seat. Most people, they read through it, they don't even understand what a Moses' seat is. Do you have an idea what it is? Moses' seat? And then the situation goes on because people they don't research. And there it is. They are going with the flow, having a reference as Israel the moment they are very disobedient. And how do you then stand before God, Yahweh? Both of you scoundrels. You for not studying the word properly, studying from a scoundrelized scripture, and then you have as a reference disobedient nation, disobedient people. What do you use to measure sin? From a disobedient source? What makes you understand, for instance, sexual sin is worse than not obeying the words of the Messiah? Then your belief becomes shaky. Then he continues. But first we must understand what it means, Moses' seat. What is it? That's why people's faith is so shaky and so weak. Moses' seat was a stone seat. A seat, regular seat made out of stone. Popular during the time. The people of the law would fabricate those seats. They would place them in special places, sometimes in the synagogue, sometimes outside. They would sit as representatives of Moses. And they would judge the people. So then you can imagine people studying the Holy Scripture, the Torah, and then the people of the law, scoundrels as they were, because they were liars. They invented takanot ma'asin of their own and mixed with the holy laws. So they could manipulate the people for their own gain. Does that sound similar of the scoundrelized scripture you have from the Greco-Romans? Since you don't study, how do you know? What is your reference point? And then the Messiah continues. Therefore, whatsoever Moses told you to do and observe, these do and observe. The Messiah is not contesting the fact the people of the law, speaking of Moses' instructions, that came from heaven. The Messiah was aware of Moses' laws were to be obeyed. Then he continues, but do not do what they do, speaking of the people of the law, because they say they do what Moses told them to do and observe, but they don't do it. So he was saying they have no authority. You know what was giving them authority? People's ignorance. So when you are ignorant, you don't study the Holy Scripture for what they are, and you bow down to those scoundrels in Israel, you are as a scoundrel as they are. Because the Mashiach is the reference point, not Israel. Israel is disobedient. You learn what the Mashiach said. You get yourself a copy of the Aramaic or Hebraic scripture and you study the words of the Mashiach. And you then become a reference point. Because the main objective of Gentiles is then studying the Word and then pointing the Messianic people back to the instructions, and you simply say to them, you must cluster. The Messiah told you, go around the world and form holy cities. You have more authority than they have, because you are obeying the prophet. If you mix yourself with those Israeli scoundrels, they don't understand the scripture, they are disobedient, contrary people, then you are as they are. You won't enter the kingdom of heaven. Then he stated and he explained. Takanot, they change the laws of Yahweh for their own gain. Maasim, they behave in a certain way and they encourage other people to behave like them even though it's sin. But it's okay because the people of the law at the time, they consider themselves above the Creator. Are you above the Creator? When you detect sin, what kind of a measuring stick do you use? Going with the flow of the world? What makes you self-righteous in understanding that a person has sexual sin if you yourself don't obey the Shabbat? You're being a scoundrel. Why do you understand that some sins are worse than the others? You know what a hypocrite means? Dual face. You know, during the time of those theater plays of the old ancient civilizations, you put a mask in front of you, that's hypocrite. That's what you are. You don't understand the scripture, but you are then judgmental. The prophet, the Mashiach, he was not concerned regarding what you think of him. He was not concerned with it. He was concerned with you understanding the scripture, the Torah. So when you read then the Mashiach speaking of being hypocrites, you understand the scripture was scoundrelized. You know why? There were no hypocrites during the time. But then again, you don't research. You speak of his words, you talk of him, you speak words that were not even part of the culture and the time. There was no hypocrite. This word was used centuries later. He said, devil, you demons. This is what he said on their faces. If you then comes around speaking of the Torah, you don't understand the scripture, you don't understand what you are reading, you know what would the Mashiach say in your face? You demon, get away from me. You don't know the scripture, you judge what you don't know, and then you try to judge others. And with the same measure that you judge others, is going to be measured back to you. So then when we begin to understand what it means for what they are, then we become the reference point. As long as we study the scripture, we study the Torah, we understand what it means, and we point the Hebraic people to cluster. Because this is what the MashiYach told them to do. Go around the world and form holy cities. Then we do our part. We can say very precisely, MashiYach, we did our part. We encourage them to do what you told them to do. And we resume our studies. Because we understand we came out of 1,000 years of lies, twisted scripture, manipulators, scoundrels. 1,000 years of lies. The copy that you have in your home of the scripture is a lie. But then you don't study for what it is, and you go with the flow, scoundrels as they are. That's why the MashiYach said, they don't enter the kingdom, neither you. But then you try to rationalize, oh, it's not that hard. And then because they go with the flow of the word, of course the word is condemned. That's why the MashiYach came and he taught the word. Because he knew the world is condemned. Any person that doesn't have discipline in their minds, understand the scripture, the Torah, the prophets, the writings, the renewed covenant, the revelation, then they are condemned. Israel is condemned. Did you know it? Did you know when Israel died, they are going to the infernal torment? Can you safely go to the world's flow of people and the spirit, and say that you are going to heaven when there is no heaven to go to? But then it's very easy for you to become judgmental. How do you measure it?